When people hear Hamblin Family Dentistry, my hope is that they equate it to the Gary Bird DDS around us that they've been to, they've experienced, and it's really good. And then they've been to the DSO that they really hated and they were treated like a number. And they say, I don't want to go back to Gary Bird DDS, but I do want to go back to another family dentist that's going to treat me really kindly.
Welcome back to another episode of My Dental Playbook. I'm your co-host, Gary Bird. Along with my friend, Dr. Blake Hamblin, we're going to be diving deep into his practice and how he's doubled his collections over the last 12 months. Today, we're going to be talking about how to name your practice. We're going to dive into how Dr. Blake named his practice, as well as SEO versus branding, different frameworks for rural versus city, expansion from single location to multiple location, corporate dentistry versus family fill, and all the things that you need to know before you name your practice or before you go to change the name of your practice. This is very insightful and it will really help you if you're thinking about growing your practice or buying another practice. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to another episode, and I'm excited for today because we're going to be talking about naming your practice. I feel like so many people get this wrong. I got it wrong when I first started in business and naming my practice. And today, Dr. Blake's going to be sharing how he came up with his name. And it's important because you got branding, you got SEO, you got future goals you got to take into account. What kind of practice are you going to be in the future? How many associates are you going to hire? That all comes into play when you're naming a practice. And before we jump into this, if you want help, if you're like, man, I don't know what to do, we have a mastermind where we meet every single month. And we tell you exactly the playbook that we're using to make sure that Dr. Blake and hundreds of other practices use to grow. So if you're stuck, if you're listening to our podcast going, I hear you, but it's not making it into action, we'll hold you accountable. It's $299 a month. The link's right down below. But we'll start with the story. So Dr. Blake reached out to me and he goes, Gary, what does SMC National stand for? And I kind of chuckled because it's kind of embarrassing, to be honest with you, because I had no idea what I was doing when I first got started in business. And when I first started my company, I was in Sacramento and I worked with all businesses, every kind of business. So I was like, you know what? How can I make sure that my website ranks all over Sacramento? Because if I can get big in Sacramento, then I made it. And so I named my marketing company. I still have the URL today, Sacramento Marketing Company. And I thought this was like the biggest brain, best thing ever. Like, this is awesome. I'm going to rank super high. And we did. We ranked high in Sacramento, got a lot of clients. And over time, I started working with dentists all over the country. And they're like, a Sacramento marketing company. Like, it's not cool. It's not like LA or New York, you know what I mean? It's Sacramento. So it's like,
you got the Kings.
Yeah, we have the Kings. Exactly. So it's not the same, right? So I was like, man, I got to change my name, but I don't know if we're going to be a marketing company, a tech company. I don't know if we're going to do other things in the future. And I never wanted to make that mistake again. So I was like, what can I name the company that I won't mess it up from a branding standpoint, but make us look big and strong and powerful. And I was like, Sacramento Marketing Company, SMC, but we went national. And so it's mad cheesy, but that's what happened. That's how we came up with the name. So SMC National just means Sacramento Marketing Company went national. That's it.
That's beautiful. I love it. That's so good. Yeah. So I was talking with somebody and their question was, what is SMC? And I think they meant like, what is your company? But I took it as, what does it stand for? And so I was like, I don't know. Let me ask Gary. And so that was a cool story, but it got us on a really cool conversation of, how do you name your business? And I know I went through that during COVID. Right before COVID is when I bought, or right after COVID is when I bought the practice. And I had a million different ways of going. I could have named it Houston Dental Group. I could have named it Houston Dental Center. I could have named it Hamblin Family Dentistry. I could have named it a lot of things. And there were a lot of reasons why I chose the name that I went with. And for me, it really centered around knowing my market. And so being in Houston, not being in a rural area, being in an area where there's lots of DSOs, lots of private equity ran dental groups, that one way to stand out, especially in tighter market, we're in a suburb of the city, I guess is what I would say. So we're not in the suburbs, but we are in a smaller little pocket in the city. Houston's very different. There's little pockets around the city versus one big city, if that makes sense. And so in our little pocket, it's very family related. And so I sat there and I was like, I want people to know that this is a different experience. I want them to know that this is a family owned, personally operated business, not a DSO run business. And so that's why I decided to use my last name as part of the name of the practice, because I wanted people to be able to drive down the highway and say, oh, that's not Memorial Dental Group. That's Hamblin Family Dentistry. And I want a personal relationship with my dentist.
Yeah, because, okay, so let's talk through this. And there's a lot of frameworks in there. So if you would have went with Houston Dental Group or Houston Dental Center, from an SEO standpoint, that would have been a better decision. And it's like, well, why? Because you have the name of your business, of what you do, dental, and you have the city where you do it, Houston Dental, and then whatever word you want to throw in the end. That's extremely powerful from an SEO standpoint, where Hamblin doesn't have any SEO correlation, right? You're just dentist, family dental. So that has a different structure. And so the two choices that you had to make between there is, do I want to be more branding? How I want to be known is that you guys can see by my hat. I got the Hamblin Family Dental hat. So you do want to be more branding driven, where it's like, hey, I'm family owned, it's privately owned, and we're local. Or do we want to have more of an SEO advantage where we rank? And you usually, sometimes I've seen a couple where you can have both. I saw somebody name their practice, Evan, actually, he's on Facebook all the time. His wife's practice is Buffalo Dental or Buffalo, something like that. And it's like, it almost seems like they only do dentistry on buffaloes, but we know that we don't do that. But it also has SEO because they're in Buffalo. And it's also really well branded. Like, so you kind of get both, but normally you can't do that. So you went through and said, okay, it's more important that the branding's really good than the SEO.
For me, I knew, like, unless something radically changed, that we were going to remain an out of network office. And so to remain on brand, to me, it made sense to keep it personal. Like, could I have done Houston Dental Group? Absolutely. And still been out of network? Yes. But when you come across that, or you drive by it on the highway, or you get online and you see Houston Dental Group, there's a different emotion, even when I say it, that is pulled out from people versus Hamblin Family Dentistry. And I really wanted that to be part of it, because people do choose to come see us. Sometimes they do pay a little bit more to have that extra level of service. And, like, for example, our logo, I intentionally made the H taller. There was a website during COVID I found that's called Behance, and it's basically just like logos. And there's the St. Regis in Hong Kong, their restaurant is basically our logo, but it's a big L. And they were explaining the logo, and the logo was elongated for the elevated service. And all of these things. And so I started, like, thinking further and further and further in this. And I was like, there's no way I can't not bring in that family aspect with our name, so that people understand that this is a different style of dentistry than you're going to get somewhere else. But I will say it's a great thing to do. Like, Buffalo Dental is fantastic. It's not that at the end of the day, your name does not make or break you. Like, if we were Houston Dental Group and we had terrible service, people still wouldn't come even.
Yeah. If you had amazing service, you'd still be doing really well. But it's more long-term than that, than what you're thinking about. Also, just as a side note, Hamblin Family Dental probably cost you $10 to buy that URL. I just looked up Houston Dental Group. If anybody wants it, it's $3,000, $3 racks right now. So, and that's probably a bid offer, right? So they might try to bid you up there. But there is a time that you do get it wrong. So let me give you where you would have messed this up. I see dentists do this all the time. If you would have named it Blake Hamblin DDS, that would have been wrong. And I'll tell you why. You would have hired 2 associates, and then you would have came back to me and said, Gary, none of my new patients will go and see my patients, or none of my patients will see the associates. And I'm like, well, duh, you named the practice after you. And then you're like, go talk to, it would be like Gary Bird marketing. And then I'm like, oh, here's our account managers and stuff. And they're like, where's Gary Bird? And so I see a lot of dentists make that mistake where they're just like, oh, I'll just name it after me. Not like you did, because you did Hamblin Family Dental. And people are like, okay, it's someone's name, but they don't know, people don't remember, so.
Yeah. And it's honestly still something we deal with. I mean, with my name being on the door, people assume that I'm the dentist that they need to see sometimes. However, I think with our patient base, they know that I wouldn't let another dentist in here that doesn't meet the waterline that we expect as far as like.
Do you have scripting that you deal with your team if someone comes in and says, well, I only want to meet with Dr. Hamblin?
Yeah, it's really easy, especially if it's something for that I don't want to do anymore. Then we just say that's totally fine. Dr. Hamblin's available to do that procedure in 2 months at 2:00 on this day. Does that work for your schedule? And they'll either say yes or no. And if they say no, then we say, okay, great. Well, Dr. Farrell is available tomorrow to get this taken care of. Ultimately, I'm still clinically.
You're using scarcity. If someone really wants you, then fine. But it's going to take longer.
Yeah. And we're not quite to the point. I think we've talked a little bit about like honing in your menu of services. I'm not quite to the point to where I'm totally taking things off. But eventually, like I just won't do fillings.
Got it.
Like Dr. Hamblin doesn't do fillings. And I know you want him to do them, but you can either not do them here, or you can have one of our associates at Dr. Hamblin hand selected to do the filling for you.
Got it. Okay. So that makes total sense. And that's awesome advice. So now the other part of this is you kind of have to know what your future is going to look like to figure this out as well. Because if you're going to have multiple locations, you need to know what kind of multiple locations you're going to have. And I've seen people where they start off with a certain name, like Houston Dental Group, but then they open another practice in Dallas and they're like, well, I just wanted it the same brand. We can't open up a Houston Dental Group at location number 2 in Dallas. It won't make sense. People will be super confused and lost, right? So you have to kind of know that in advance. And so there's 3 frameworks that I've built out with this, and I would love your thoughts on this. So there's, and I'm just using these big corporations because everybody knows them. So I'm using their example. So you have the Aspen Dental model. What is that? It's one brand, one website, everybody on that website. The advantages to that is SEO. When you add another location, you automatically get SEO on that location because it's just rolled in from they get all the juice from all of your other locations. The downside of it is once you get a bad reputation, you're cooked. Like there's hate groups online for Aspen Dental, but not for the other big DSOs. Why? Because they have one name, so they're easy to attack. So you're always going to have people upset, right? And so there's pros and cons to that. Then there's the Heartland model. The Heartland model is literally the exact opposite. There's no hate groups for Heartland. Why? Because we don't even know the names of the practice. If you walk into a Heartland practice, you actually don't know you're in a Heartland practice. And so Heartland is, we have one big corporation, but a bunch of little individual brands underneath that are named whatever the dentist wants to name them. The advantage of that is you have just local branding opportunities, right? You can call it Houston Family Dental if you want to. The downside is you're starting from scratch every single time. So every single time it's like a brand new practice, brand new URL. So that's that side. But then there's a hybrid of those two. And it's the Pacific model. Have you ever been into a Pacific Dental office?
I don't know if I have.
Okay, so Pacific Dental uses the exact same logo, the same color, the same branding on every practice. But you wouldn't know that unless you went into a bunch of them. I've been into several of them, just checking them out before. So they have the same layout for everything. However, they change the name on each of them. So almost nobody knows that they're doing this. What they do is everybody gets their own website. So it might be like, ABC Dental of, whatever, LA. And that's the URL. But when you go to the website, it's the same cookie cutter website that they use for every brand, same logo, even just with a different name every time. And so now you get the scalability. So you don't have to make a new website every time if you want to build out to 10 locations. But you also don't have the brand risk of one practice doing really cruddy and getting sued and then ruining the brand of all the other practices. So that's one of the naming frameworks that I always walk through with people of like, well, if you're going to grow, you need to kind of think through how you're going to tackle this.
Yeah. And that makes me reflect back to before dental school, I had kind of a gap year between college and dental school. And I worked at a dental office. I think I shared this story a little bit, but the guy who owned the practice I learned a ton from is Dr. Noxon. And he made the analogy one time, for whatever reason it stuck with me, is he made the analogy of you can either own a bunch of Dollar Generals or one Walmart. And the idea in my mind just clicked of like, I'd much rather own, right now in my season of life, I'd much rather own one Walmart. Like I want to own one super mega store with a low overhead, a reduced administrative burden. And then, down the road, like I do think having multiple locations is something that I want to do, and I'll have to tackle that experience when I get there. But I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to go from 5 ops.
You had a lot of growth room. You had a long runway in the practice that you were in.
For sure. But the growth was not go do it in multiple locations. It was grow one location. And so I knew I was willing to bet my name on it.
Yeah, that's really good. And I like that. That's probably how I would do it if I was a dentist too. And the reason for that is it's way less risk, because if you're only building a bunch of little practices and you're jumping one to another and you get 5 up really quick. Mark Costas, I talked to him when he first started. He was like, he kind of had that model and he was like, yeah, there was things that I didn't know as I did it that really cost me. And looking back on it, maybe I would have done it a different way. I think doing one big practice and then saying, this is my stable big practice does a couple things. One, you can train people there and then you can send them out to start new practices. And 2, you have stable income. You're not going to take out 5 different loans you're taking a little bit from each one. You're making a good salary, a good living, and even having good margins with your big practice. And you don't have to worry about where, what's going to happen because practice 2 and 3 stop performing. You know what I mean? So I like that model. What else do you think people need to think through when they're naming their practice?
I think kind of where I started was, are you rural or are you urban? I think in my opinion, and you can correct me, if you're in a more rural setting, you can probably get away with using the city, Katie Dental Group, because they just don't have enough options to really care what your name is. Whereas if you're urban, I think you have to be really selective in what you name your practice, because it's going to elicit an emotion out of people. When people hear Hamblin Family Dentistry, my hope is that they equate it to the Gary Bird DDS around us that they've experienced, and it's really good. And then they've been to the DSO that they really hated and they were treated like a number. And they say, I don't want to go back to Gary Bird DDS, but I do want to go back to another family dentist that's going to treat me really kindly. And not that DSOs can't do that, but that was the thought process I had, but it very much had to do with where I was located as well.
Yeah, rural's interesting because so often you're trying to pull from way far away, and you need to figure out like rural's tricky when I'm looking at a map.
So if you're rural, you just go with Texas, like you just go Texas Dental Group.
Yeah. Well, and not just that, it's like, okay, if you're in the town that has the Costco and everybody drives from 40 minutes away, 50 minutes away to come to that Costco, then more than likely they're willing to do their dentistry there. Or if the school's there and everybody drives 30 minutes to school, you know what I mean? Everybody brings their kids. More than likely you want the town's name in the title because you want them going, oh, that's in town, right? Because that's different than Houston. Houston, you don't go, hey, I want to track all the way across Houston on the other side to go to the dental office. Like, you just don't want that. So actually the suburbs is a little bit more powerful. The little pocket names are more powerful from a pulling standpoint. Where now if you're rural and you're not in the town with a Costco, then you don't want the name because you want to be able to pull people in without them thinking about, oh, that's that way, or up the hill. So it gets really, really tricky.
At what point, I'm thinking about people that might be listening to us and they live in like upstate New York. Like at what point would it make sense to be like so granular that you're the street name? Or, like, do you have experience working with these people?
Well, here's where it gets interesting. New Jersey, like all these areas, Houston's totally different. West Coast is totally different. We have these huge, like pretty big cities, you know what I mean? And even the small cities are pretty big. In New Jersey, New York, they have these little boroughs and they're tiny. I mean, when they're tiny, like on the map, they're tiny. So if you name it after the little borough, you instantly rank in that borough, but you might be one of 5 dentists in that little borough. And so it's like, okay, well, you can rank there, but how many people actually live there? And then you have to understand traffic flow. So like some of these New Jersey, New York areas, those are the toughest. And it's like, what I always ask people is like, explain the traffic flow to me in this area. Like no one drives across this bridge to do anything, right? And they're like, yeah, no one, only if they have to, they'll drive across that bridge. Okay. So we don't want to market on that side. What on this side are you nearby that everybody goes to? Again, the Costco, the grocery store, the dry cleaners, all of this, the school. Chick-fil-A is another really popular one. They're really good at placing their stores like for families, like right in the middle of. So are you in between where people live and those places that they're going to go buy it every single day? That's perfect. And then is there anything that you can anchor to as a name? So like Second Street Dental may be like the perfect name if you're driving down Second Street to go from your house to school.
Right.
Or it might be a horrible name because you're like, oh, that's 10, 4 blocks that way. And I have to fight traffic. And
that just reminds me, and I feel like we've talked about this about marketing too, is you have to be, not that you have to know how to do it, but you have to be the expert in it. Like you have to understand your market at a level, because as much as you know about marketing, there are things that you don't know about Houston, and specifically in my area of Houston that I do know. And there are things that we've talked about and you're like, oh, wow, okay, that changes everything. And you've got to have that relationship with your marketing company. If you're starting a business and you want to have like really good branding, I do think working with some sort of designer is probably worth the money. I had COVID and I'm a relatively creative person. So I created a lot of the stuff that we did. But looking back, I probably would have used like a 99 Designs or even paid a little bit more than what
It's not that much anymore though for graphic design, for like logos and layouts and schemes. It's not crazy.
Right. But I do think it's worth it because you get a cohesive brand versus just like you got a tooth and you painted it blue. Like it's just different, There's
a lot to it, and I'll give you another example. Another curveball is like I work with a dentist. She is in Manhattan, and I actually done a podcast with her. And she did a startup, young female dentist, which is number one. She's totally different than everybody. She's a Singh. She's Indian, so she's like different than the dentist in that area, or older white guys, right? So she's totally different than everybody else. And then she went on her blog, like there's. In her area, it's super uber rich area. And all the doctors are all out of network. All of them. Every one of them. So she's like, I'm going in network with every insurance. She exploded. And I'm just like, most dentists are like, oh, I just want to get out of insurance. She's like, no, I'm just going to go in network. I'm going to be literally the exact opposite of what everybody else is doing. She did it.
She's a market disruptor.
And she grew really fast. Like really, like, and it wasn't hard to market, right? Because it's like, hey, do you want something that's totally different than everything else in your area? Here you go.
And this is such a unique point, but it's so prevalent. Like you just need that one thing. For us, I found it's the $49 cleaning. I found that is what makes us so daggum competitive here in Houston. She was like, I'm in the small little area, but I'm going to go in network. And that was the one thing. You don't have to do everything. You just have to find the one thing that makes you different.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And then it adjusts, right? So like it used to be for a long time that just being open just 5 days a week was like such a game changer. And in some markets, it still is. Patient financing is a huge, like I still personally think that is the biggest game changer. If you can go out of network, if you can use, it doesn't matter if you're in network, out of network, if you use patient financing and you lead with it and you just offer monthly payments, you're different than 99% of the dentists in your market. Like, so anyways, we're way off topic now. So we're not even awesome, guys. Hopefully you learned something. If this was valuable to you, drop a comment down below and check out our mastermind. Check out all of our courses coming up. You can see all those. Most of them are free. And you guys have a great day. Thanks, Dr. Blake.
Love it. Thanks for having me.